Okay, so many of you may recall that sometime last late summer, early fall, we offered a series of seminars that we called Apps You Should Know. And during one of those seminars, we discussed the BARD app. Well, today we're going to talk about the many different ways above and beyond the BARD app that someone can access
iPad
the
has joined
National
the meeting.
Library Service. Okay, and as a part of accessing the National Library Service, they could be accessing through BARD. Now, BARD is an acronym for Braille and Audio Reading Download Service. But first, let's make sure that everyone knows what the NLS is. We'll quickly go through that, and then we'll discuss the myriad ways that you can access the National Library Service. The NLS is part of the Library of Congress, and it administers a free, yes, you heard that right, free National Library program that provides Braille and recorded materials to people who cannot see regular print or handle print materials. It was established way back in 1931 by Congress to serve blind adults. Then it was expanded in 1952 to include children, later expanded in 1962 to include music materials, and then again in 1966 to include individuals with other physical disabilities other than blindness, but that those physical disabilities may prevent them from reading regular print. A perfect example of that is someone who has dyslexia. In 2016, it was expanded again to provide refreshable Braille displays as part of the equipment that they provide to eligible patrons. Now, this program is funded by Congress each year, and it's administered through a network of cooperating libraries at the state and local level. It started with only 19 libraries, but it's expanded to now include 55 regional libraries, another 26 sub-regional libraries, and 13 advisory and outreach centers, but at all told, serve all 50 states, the District of Columbia, Puerto Rico, Guam, and the U.S. Virgin Islands. Now, how the NLS works, they use a special provision of the U.S. copyright law and permission from the authors and publishers of any works that are not governed by that law. And they select books, magazines, and music for full-length publication in either Braille, e-Braille, and digital audio formats. Now, these materials are circulated through that network of libraries I mentioned just a second ago. And additionally, the e-Braille and digital materials are available for download through the National Library Service BARD and the BARD mobile app. Now, who's eligible for it? Any resident of the U.S. or a U.S. citizen who's living abroad who's unable to read or use regular print materials as a result of a temporary or permanent visual, physical, perceptual, or reading disability can apply. Once you're granted eligibility, access is limited and non-transferable. The reason they do that is to protect the intellectual property, economic, and copyright protections for the authors and the publishers of these works. They basically are agreeing to allow access to all of these publications free for those who qualify, but they don't want us to share that free access with everyone else. What sort of materials are available? Well, books are selected for the National Library Service collection to appeal to a wide cross-section of the population. Roughly 65% are fiction, 35% are nonfiction. This includes everything from bestsellers, biographies, fictional books, and how-to books. And while the majority are in English, there are materials in other languages. Since early 2019, the U.S. has participated in an international treaty called the Marrakesh Treaty, and we can therefore provide accessible materials in a wide range of languages. Now, in addition to books, there's over 20,000 magazine issues are available from over 100 different magazine titles. And those, again, cover a wide spectrum of topics that are applicable for both adults and children. Now, BARD, and I mentioned earlier, that's an acronym, but we're just going to use BARD in general, but it means the Braille and Audio Reading Download. It's a free online service that provides access to all of these materials through compressed digital audio and e-Braille formats that are only available to the National Library Service patrons. The NLS website is password protected so that only eligible patrons can access the materials. So once you submit an application, if it's been approved, you have to set up your own access with an email account and an associated password. All of the files are downloadable as compressed audio or formatted e-braille files. They're transferable to National Library Service cartridges or USB drives, which can be used on NLS equipment, that's the National Library Service issued equipment, or compatible commercial audio players. Now, how does one acquire these materials? Well, one of the main points of today's presentation is that there are a lot of different ways that you can obtain the materials from the National Library Service. And we hope that at least one of these are things that are going to suit most readers. Let's talk about some of those. First, the traditional way that the National Library Service program started was for people to receive materials through the U.S. mail. The National Library Service has two slightly different digital talking book players that it can send to a registered user. One is a standard model and one is an advanced model. The basic or standard model provides functionality for playback for talking books, including volume and tone control, rewind and fast forward, and variable speed. The advanced model has additional controls for setting bookmarks and navigating through different types of book structures, like chapters and sections and things of that nature. Now, both models operate on a built-in rechargeable battery, and they have an internal audio user guide. So you don't have to worry about reading some print instructions on how to use it. They include an audio description of the user guide with it. Now, these playback devices are mailed to the patrons via Free Matter for the Blind, and they are designed to work exclusively with materials from the National Library Service. For those who may have had vision at one point or have residual vision now, these devices may make you recall the old cassette players because they're about the same size, 3 or 4 inches wide and maybe 8 or 10 inches long and a couple of inches tall. When you use one of these devices, the National Library Service will include a cartridge that is designed to fit into the device. And the National Library Service asks that if you're not using these readers or when you stop using them, that you should return them to the closest National Library Service affiliated library. Now, the cartridges basically house a USB style device onto which the books are copied for distribution. You may think of it as maybe a thumb drive or something like that that you have used in the past for other reasons. Each cartridge typically holds 6 to 10 publications, depending upon the size of the publication. Books can vary in size, and magazines are even smaller. If you use this method to access the National Library Service materials, the cartridges are periodically mailed to you inside of a small plastic container that protects the cartridge from the elements. That plastic container has an external slot on one side which holds the mailing address card with all the pertinent information for the U.S. mail. When you're finished listening to the materials that are on the cartridge, you can just simply pull the card out, flip it over, turn it back, reinsert it back into the same slot, and then you just drop that plastic container into the nearest mail drop and put it out for your, or you can put it out for the postal delivery person when they come to deliver your mail. U.S. postage in both directions is covered through that Free Matter for the Blind. Now, part of the sign up and enrollment process that has been used for many years involves a fairly lengthy questionnaire that allows you as the patron to be able to tell the National Library Service what sort of materials you're interested in reading, including a variety of genres and book types. And based on your answers to those questionnaires, the National Library Service attempts to send you a random set of materials that conform with what you reported as your interests. So, for example, if you tell them that you like science fiction or that you like historical fiction, then they're going to try to send you books that fall into those respective genres. However, one issue that I have heard from a number of clients is that the materials being sent don't always seem to be right for the things that they're interested in reading. So it might be science fiction, but it isn't necessarily something that they're interested in once they start listening to it. And basically, the users want a greater degree of choice, just like if they walked into a library and got a chance to browse for particular authors or topics. Now, there are a number of other options that allow you that sort of autonomy. These search and browse options exist using any of the methods that we're going to be describing from here on, other than getting the cartridges in the mail. You can search by author, by title, or by subject using keywords. You can search for recently added books or magazines, and that particular sub-search includes anything that's been added in the last 30 days. You can search for the most popular books, and that sub-search includes the most popular downloads in the last 30 days. You can also search by language, and you can search or browse both music scores and books. Magazines you can search for by title or for the most recently updated issues, because magazines tend to come out more frequently. One other thing to remember is that when you're searching for National Library Service BARD content, you have the option to filter the searches by format, meaning that you can elect to search for audio content only, Braille content only, or both. If you do not read Braille, then it's best to select the audio only so that you can obtain the format that you want. You don't want to accidentally end up requesting something in Braille if you can't read Braille. One of the other things that is available on BARD Mobile as a part of the searching from National Library Service content is that you have the ability, if you've got the mobile device and you're using it, to search back through issues and books that you've already taken out from the library. So if you had a book that you really enjoyed, or you want to go back and double check something from a quotation from the book or something of that nature, you always have the retrospective search of anything that you've already taken through from the library. Now let's talk about BARD Express. Registered patrons can download electronic files of Braille books, magazines, and music materials, along with the digital talking books and magazines, through the internet using the BARD online site. Now that site is pretty straightforward. It's https:// all the usual preliminaries, but it's nlsbard.loc for Library of Congress.gov. You can use that site to sign up initially, and then to sign in whenever you want to access the National Library Service Library of Materials. Once you're on the site, you have the ability to download an app called the BARD Express application. Now, BARD Express simplifies the process by providing a very menu-driven interface, reducing the need for you to memorize a complex set of keyboard commands. The latest version includes a BARD Express player, which allows you to then choose an audiobook or magazine from BARD Express bookshelf and listen to it directly on your PC. That means you don't need any other kind of device. You can just listen to it using your PC. Materials that are downloaded to a computer using BARD Express can also then be transferred to digital cartridge or USB drive in order to play it on a digital talking book machine or one of the compatible third-party players. So those two digital talking book machines that I talked about earlier, you can actually fill them up with books of your own choosing, or you can also, in addition to those two players, use any one of a number of compatible third-party players. However, patrons who attempt to access the National Library Service materials in this manner must have a high-speed internet connection to use BARD. Now, audiobooks. Let's talk about audiobooks first. We talked about cartridges, and there's really three different ways that you can use the cartridges. One is to have those cartridges mailed to you by the NLS, and you play them on the National Library Service player that they issued to you. Another is that you use the BARD Express website and you unzip the book that you select down to a cartridge and then play it on the National Library Service player. Then you can also use BARD Express to be able to transfer that information or that book to a cartridge and then play that on the National Library Service player. So there's a couple of different ways that you can do that. In addition, as I mentioned just a few minutes ago, registered National Library Service patrons can use BARD Express to download the materials directly to their computers. And that program can be downloaded to the computer to facilitate access, so it makes it much easier. Excuse me. In addition, for those of you who are JAWS users, there are JAWS scripts that enable a very user-friendly JAWS interface with BARD Express. Now, I mentioned a few minutes ago that there are compatible third-party players. What do I mean by that? So the National Library Service can issue you an audiobook player. There's two different versions that I mentioned before. But in addition to that, over the last several years, very recently, they have determined that a lot of people who are in the blind and low vision community already have a number of devices that they use for accessibility purposes. Many of those devices are now able to also be used to listen to the National Library Service content. So in this case, you're downloading those materials onto cartridges or flash drives for the simplified transfer to your player. Now, I'm going to read off not all of them, but a good number of them that may be something that you already have or that you already use. So bear with me, but I'm going to read through this list. The Apex Braille Note or the Apex Voice Note. The APH Bookport DT or the Bookport Plus player and recorder. From HIMS, HIMS, there is the BookSense, the BookSense DS, the BookSense XT, the Blaze ET, and the Blaze EZ. And lastly from HIMS is the Sense Note Taker. There's also some Braille Sense devices, the Braille Sense U2, Braille Sense U2 Mini, the Braille Sense U2 QWERTY, QWERTY. Then there's the Milestone 312 voice recorder and MP3 player, the Plex Talk Pocket, the Plex Talk PTN2. Then we get to two of the more popular ones, the Voice Reader Stream, which could also include the Voice Reader Stratus or the Voice Reader Trek, as well as the Blind Shell Telephone. Now that's quite a list, and those are all devices that people may have acquired as a means of providing themselves with accessibility for a number of different reasons. But they also are devices to which you can transfer and listen to National Library Service materials. Now, let's talk about BARD Mobile for a minute. BARD Mobile is an app that is available on Android devices, Apple iOS devices, and on Kindle Fire tablets. That app can be acquired from the Google App Store, the Apple App Store, or the Amazon App Store, respectively, for each of Android, iOS, and Kindle Fire. The app is free. Once you download the app, you'll need to sign in to your BARD account that you created through the computer. Agree to the pledge not to share access. And if you have only used NLS cartridges or online BARD Express services in the past, you will likely need to contact your local BARD National Library Service affiliated library so that they can change some of the behind-the-scenes account settings to enable you to also use BARD Mobile. That's some internal, if you will, machinations on their part to set up your account so that they know that you are able to and have access to BARD Mobile through any of those devices. So once again, on Android, iOS, or Kindle Fire tablets, you can literally go in and download the materials you want to read and play them directly on the devices. When I started today's session, I mentioned that last year we went through the the BARD mobile device, or BARD mobile app, I should say, that is primarily that I teach for people on the iPhone, but it's also the same interface that's available on Android. And I've learned that it's the same interface on the Kindle Fire as well. Just like with everything else, you can select the books that you want by author, by title, etc. And then you can go through and be able to read the device directly on your device, or read the materials directly on your device. Thank you. Now, in addition to that, there's also some direct access capabilities. We talked a little bit about one of the two of these devices earlier. On the Victor Reader Stream, and that includes the Model 2, the Model 3, and the Victor Reader Stream Trek, you can directly authorize your Victor Reader Stream device to play National Library Service materials. Now, that's in addition to having the ability to download the materials using BARD Express. You can not only transfer the materials over from BARD Express, but you can actually use part of the programming that's inherent directly in the Victor Reader to be able to select and download your materials. Another one is the Blind Shell telephone. On the Blind Shell telephone, there is a book reader application on the phone, and you can use that to be able to authorize that device to be able to access your account, to be able to download your books. And then most recently, and this is the part that has got a lot of people excited, Alexa-enabled smart speakers have the ability to use what's called the My Talking Books Alexa skill. And when you use that My Talking Books Alexa skill, eligible patrons can then use that to access the NLS devices. That one can get tricky because you're having to speak to the A lady and you're having to tell the A lady what it is that you're looking for and then searching through the different options. So if you ask for the books by Hemingway, you're going to get a lot of different books to be able to go through. And you'll have to literally go through the list in order to figure out which ones you want to read. The same is true with any particularly popular author. Now, we've been talking a lot about the audiobooks. I want to switch gears and talk about Braille books for a few minutes. As noted earlier, the National Library Service content is also available in Braille for those who read Braille. Now, Braille content can be read on refreshable Braille displays or on Braille e-readers. Note that many of those compatible third-party players that I read through just a few minutes ago are actually Braille e-readers. And again, there are multiple methods that are available for you to access the Braille content. That includes going to the BARD website, downloading the Braille material, and then read it with an e-reader that's attached to your PC, going to BARD Express, downloading it, using the BARD Express app, and then transfer it to a cartridge, which you can then read with your e-reader. You can use a National Library Service Braille e-reader that has been issued to you, and there are at least 2 different models of those that are available these days, that all you have to do is contact the National Library Service and request. And once again, those are free devices, just like the audio players are free. You can also use BARD Mobile on either Android or iOS and download and read the items in Braille through a paired e-reader to the mobile device. Now, you have to remember that refreshable Braille displays have to use a connection with a screen reader to work. But that screen reader doesn't have to be on a computer. It can be a screen reader that's on an iOS device, like an iPhone or an iPad, or it can be on an Android device. And those connections can either be wired or wireless using Bluetooth connections. And one of the other things to be aware of is that while there's a lot of options here, there's also some opportunity for you to be able to get help with BARD. There's a number of ways that you can do that. You can access the BARD instructions and frequently asked questions, or FAQs, on the BARD website under a link that's entitled, or a heading rather, that is entitled Additional Links. You can also email the BARD support team at nlsdownload@loc.gov. You can also contact the National Library Support Desk. And for those of us that are here in the Chicago metro area, the Chicago Public Library in downtown Chicago at the main branch happens to have an assistive resources and talking book center that is located on the 5th floor of the main library. They can be reached by telephone at 312-747-4001, or they can be emailed at ARTBC, which is the acronym for Assistive Resources and Talking Book Center. So ARTBC at CHIPUBLIB, which is short for chicagopubliclibrary.org. You can also access the BARD Mobile, BARD Express, or the National Library Service e-reader how-to series of videos on YouTube. Yes, I said that right, YouTube. They've created a number of how-to series. There's one for the BARD Express YouTube series. There's one for BARD Mobile for iOS. There's one for BARD Mobile for Android. There's one for the NLS Reader ZoomMax and for the NLS e-reader HumanWare. Those are the two different manufacturers of the National Library Service e-readers. Each of those are a separate how-to series that you can listen to in order to gain additional information. Now, obviously, the National Library Service, BARD service, is a wonderful tool for being able to access recreational reading materials, including audiobooks, braille books, magazines, music, and they've given you a lot of different ways to access these materials. And these different methods that you have to get to them have expanded and grown over the last few years. They've made great efforts to open up those means of access to a number of different accessible tools to ensure that eligible patrons can take advantage of the collection. So we don't have any excuses. Just get reading. Okay, now that's the end of my prepared comments about the BARD service and the National Library Service. And I want to open it up for questions or comments. So please feel free to go ahead and raise your hands. And once again, on the phone, that would be *9. On the PC, that's Alt-Y. On the Mac, it's Option-Y. And on a smartphone or tablet, look for the reactions button that's at the bottom middle of your display. All right, so Cindy, you have raised your hand. I'm asking you to unmute.
Okay, hi. So thank you so much. This was so much great information. I use this BARD app myself and I really love it. And I didn't know half the stuff you were talking about. So this was really educational.
You're
So
quite welcome.
I wanted to ask you a question, not about myself, but I'm wondering if you know about qualification. I actually have a couple questions, but the first one is about qualifying for using the BARD service. My mom is 83 years old and she has spinal issues and she's not able to hold a book to read. And she was an avid reader in her life. So I'm just wondering, does she qualify for this or is this only for the visually impaired?
It is not only for the visually impaired, as I think the wording that I copied straight off of their website is for anyone who is unable to read or use regular print materials as a result of a temporary or permanent visual, physical, perceptual, or reading disability can apply. So I think
Okay.
your mother's situation falls into the physical category.
Yeah, I think you're right. Oh, that's great. Great. That's really good to know. I do have another question, but I can wait until and let someone else go first if they have a question.
I don't see any other hands up at the moment, Cindy, so why don't you go ahead and get started?
Okay, so I'm wondering if you know about the process of how they select the books. Did you come across anything about how do they pick what books are going to be in the system? Because I put in a request for some and you fill out this form, but then you never hear anything back. So I just have to keep checking and see if they're on there.
Well, a
Um,
couple of things. In the research that I did, they pointed out that they try to go with a very wide spectrum of interests, and they try to also go with books that they or materials that they know are quite popular with the general population. So they're using reading activities and use experience, if you will, from both the sighted and those who are using the NLS service as a means of trying to pick things. Having said that, I
ah,
know that there's going to be some authors that might be quite popular in certain areas, but they may not have them, or they may have the author but not have all of that author's books.
right, right.
So they went into that in general terms. Now, some of the wording that you just used, though, Cindy, indicated that you filled out a form. You do realize that using the iOS BARD mobile app, which I only know because I know you use the iOS Apple devices,
Yeah.
but it's true also on Android or the Kindle Fire. You can go in and search for books directly on your device using either the author name, the title of the book, or any keywords. So you may not know the title, but you know the general topic, for example. And it will end up giving you the research results of everything that they have that meet those criterion. So you can use any of those three different methods to search for things without having to fill out a form. You're just doing it straight on the app.
Oh, but I was requesting for them to have a book in their system.
Oh, I see. I'm sorry. I misunderstood, Cindy. Bear with me there.
Yeah, no, that's okay. Yeah, so I didn't know if you knew anything about that process, how they, look into a book that's requested at all.
No, I'm afraid I don't know anything about that process, and I didn't come across it when I was doing the research for today's presentation.
Yeah, that's okay. I just figured I'd ask since we're talking Bard. Thank you so much, Eric.
Absolutely. Does anyone else have a question and want to raise their hand? Don't be bashful. In very general
Okay.
terms, since no one has raised their hand, I'll just make a few more comments from my own personal perspective. Many very popular authors that I hear about, people that appear on the New York Times bestseller lists, people that might appear in some of the local bookstores here in Chicago as being very popular, are ones that you're going to be able to find. You're also going to find that there are, as I mentioned earlier, it's not just fictional books, but also things like biographies and how-to books and things of that nature. Um, Although there are some textbooks that happen to be out there, it's not really designed or focused on textbooks. Um, I've had much better luck with textbooks on an app that's very similar. It's also quite accessible called Bookshare, but it is not offered by the National Library Service. But the point being that it is a fairly wide variety of materials that happen to be out there. Anyone else have any other questions for today?
Eric, this is Gloria.
Hi, Gloria.
Hi, everyone. I do have BARD, and if I don't download something within a certain period of time, will I get bumped off, or am I always still able to be a BARD member? I heard somewhere that if you didn't order another or download a book within a month, you're bumped off, and I don't know how they bump you off, but
So I'm not exactly sure if it's 1 month or if it's a little bit of a different timeline, like 2 months or 3 months. So just out of conservatism, let's assume that it's a 1 month. Once you set up the account, they want to know that it's a legitimate request to go through the process of setting up the account and what have you. So they do ask you to go ahead and at least make one download. And that helps ensure that in fact it's a legitimate request that came through that's been set up for an individual to request books. They do actually have a monitoring process where they can go in and determine how much you're utilizing the service. I don't think of that in a big brother type of way. I think of it more as a way of providing and ensuring appropriate oversight to ensure you're not having issues with the way the site is working or the way that the service is working. I know that whenever I have called, for example, the Chicago Public Library desk, the people there have been quite graceful and assisting of people who have any issues. I had one client who, unfortunately, both they and their son, who was a junior, had accounts, and there was some confusion over which account was which and which books went to which one. They were able to get that kind of information worked through. So there's some behind the scenes work that they do in order to keep track of everything. But yes, you do need to make sure that initially you get a download taken care of. And then on a periodic and regular basis, even if it's just, and most people do this for fun, to go out and find something to listen to for fun. One of the things that I mentioned earlier to keep in mind is that once you do download something, there is a record kept of it, and that's to help facilitate your ability to go back and reread something that you really liked. And you have the ability to go back and search for things based on the title or by roughly when you read it. So, for example, if you know it was something that you were reading sometime last Thanksgiving, but you can't remember the name of it or the author of it, you can literally do a search by the timeline and go back to that general timeline to look at what materials you downloaded and were reading during that timeline.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Are there any other questions today? Okay, one quick thing that I want to do, I did read off a couple of things like a web address and some phone numbers. So I want to, for just to make sure that people have an opportunity to make note of those things, I want to go ahead and mention those again. And we will have the recording available if anyone wants to contact us to request the recording. But the BARD online site can be reached at NLS BARD, which is BARD. So NLSBARD dot LOC dot GOV. And then I also mentioned the way to contact the Chicago Public Library desk. And that's at the telephone number 312-747-4001, or you could email them at ARTBC, which is the acronym for the Assistive Resources and Talking Book Center, at CHIPUBLIB.org. So that's CHI for Chicago, PUB for public, and LIB for library. And I found the folks down there to be very, very capable and very willing to assist. One more opportunity. Anybody have any questions?
Hey, Eric, got a question.
Sure.
What about us that live in the suburbs? Do we still have to call the library that's in Geneva?
In Geneva, Well, the
Didn't hear-
main Chicago, pardon me. So the National Library Service, I mentioned that it has those regional and sub-regional offices that it works through.
Oh, okay, good.
So the main one happens to be downtown, in the Chicago area. It's the one that's at the main Chicago Library.
Hmm.
Okay. Now there is one for the state of Illinois, for the rest of the state, that's not in Chicago, and that's out of Springfield. If there's anybody on the call who wants the information for the one in Springfield, give me just a minute and I'll pull up that information and read that off too. Anybody want that? As long as you're in the metro Chicago area, the Cook and Collier counties, you would want to go through the one down at the Chicago Public Library.
Okay, no, I'm all right.
Okay,
Thanks.
sure. Anyone else? All right. I want to thank all of you for calling in today. I hope that you were able to get something useful and interesting out of it. And join us again when we have our Apple Exchange every month, as well as periodically when we do these presentations on other non-Apple but very informative information about how to use and access services that are worthwhile for those of us who are in the blind and low vision community. I want you to have a great day and have an enjoyable holiday weekend coming up.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Eric.
All
Fire
right.
up those girls.
All right. Bye-bye, everybody.
And
Bye-bye.
bye now.
Bye-bye.